In this video, we will cover animated sprites and cameras. In our last video, we covered importing sprites from a sprite sheet. A sprite sheet is any single image that has multiple smaller images that can be used as sprites. The sprite sheet might be well organized, or it might seem to be a jumbled up mess. It might have animated sprites, or it might just be a collection of individual sprites. Sometimes you can pull just one sprite off of a sprite sheet. Sometimes you pull a lot of sprites off of the sprite sheet. Just depends on what you're looking for. There are sprite sheets with solid backgrounds and sprite sheets with transparent backgrounds. Depending on what you're looking for, sometimes one is easier to find than the other, but both are manageable. And we looked at that in our last video. In this video, we're going to look at how to use a single image sprite and convert that to a fairly simplistic animated sprite. So let's get started. Over here in GameMaker, I'm going to start by creating a new sprite. So I'll right-click on Sprites and create a new sprite. And I'm going to call this sprite Hi. In our previous video, we would have clicked Edit Image and then come into Click Image and Import Strip Image. And that's because the image I used had multiple sprites in it. However, this time, the image I'm going to use is just a single frame. So rather than go that way, I'm going to click Import. So I'm searching for my image, and my image is called Hi 3. And you can click Don't Show Me This message anymore, and this pop-up will stop coming. Otherwise, you're just going to click Yes every time. So I'm going to check Don't Show Me This anymore. And here is my image. Notice it has a transparent background. And that's my Bitmoji saying hi. Well, I'm going to make the hand animated. I'm going to do that pretty quick and simply. So we're going to need to go to Edit Image. Notice this image has a single frame. I'm going to make it animated by duplicating this frame and then making changes. So I can duplicate it by right-clicking and choosing Copy, and then right-click again and choose Paste, or you can always use Control-C, Control-V. Now I have two frames. This is currently the first frame, and I know that because underneath of my frame there's this green line. If I click the second frame, now this is the second frame. Nothing changed because they're duplicates, so they are still identical. So I'm going to edit this picture by removing my arm and then changing it just a little bit. I'm going to start with this rectangle selection tool. Now, unfortunately, in GameMaker, you can only make selections that are rectangular in shape. But that's okay. I can deal with that. So I have my selection. I'm going to Control-C to copy it. Now notice over here in brushes, I have a brush that looks like my arm. And if I bring my cursor over here, I have my arm that I could actually paint with. It's not what I want to do. What I actually want to do is erase this much of my arm. So I'm going to, instead of using the paintbrush tool, I'm going to change to the eraser tool. And now I have an eraser that is the exact shape of my arm. So I'm going to click to erase that. I didn't quite get it right, so I'm just going to go ahead and erase the rest of it. Now notice that this second frame doesn't have an arm, but the first frame does. I'm going to turn on what's called onion skin, and that's these two kind of teardrop shapes up here at the top. You know, teardrops because onions make you cry, I guess. I don't know. Sounds good to me. Notice that that brought my arm back, but it's red. Red is the color of my onion skin. The onion skin is coming from this first frame because in this second frame, I don't have an arm, but it shows up there. Now I'm going to come over here to my toolbox again, and I still have my hand selected, but I'm going to choose this rotate brush tool. And I'm going to hold my mouse and rotate that hand. Okay, so I want to rotate it this way, not a lot. If you look up in the top, you will see that the rotation angle is shown up there. And if you care about making the rotation the exact same degree every time, you could write that down. I'm not that concerned. So I'm just going to kind of guesstimate it. So this is about where I would want it to be rotated. And now over here, all I have to do is click off of this tool anywhere. I'm going to choose the paintbrush tool. And then up here, now I have two paintbrushes that look pretty darn similar. They're really not. They're at different angles. So that was my original arm, and this is my angled arm. And now if I come back over here, you can see that if I paint, I'm just a little bit lower. So I'm going to paint my arm right there. And then I'm going to turn onion skin off. And I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to choose the color picker or eyedrop tool. I'm going to left click on the shirt, and I'm going to right click on the skin so I get my shirt color and my skin color. And then I'm going to zoom way in here. Move this up, zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to fill my shirt in and clean that arm up. So I might want a little bit bigger. Okay, that's good enough. I think I can draw with that. Like I said before, I'm not really an artist, so I don't always draw the best, but I like that. So I'm going to change to black, and I want this to be just a little bigger, I think. I think that's about the thickness of that line to begin with. And maybe not. Undo that, make that a little smaller, and I'll do this in a couple of passes instead. So I'm just outlining my shirt to try and make that match as close as I can get it. And now I'm going to use the paint bucket, and I'm going to right click instead of left click to fill in that. And I'll change this back, and I'll right click and fill in the skin. And then I will left click and kind of draw that in, and maybe I'll right click and erase this a little bit. So, okay, that looks fairly natural to me. So I'll zoom back out. And now I'm going to do basically the same thing. So I'm going to copy that, Control C, Control V. I'm going to choose the second one. I'm going to choose my second hand brush, which is this one right here. I'm going to change to my eraser tool and erase it. Better that time. Now I'm going to change to my rotate brush tool, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit more. And honestly, I think 348 is what I had last time. And if it's not, it's close enough. And then I'll click my paintbrush tool, and I will turn onion skin back on. And if you have white, then you'll get the color of the brush to begin with. So I've changed that left click to white so that I can drop my hand here. And then again, I'll zoom, 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 and move this up and change it to a regular brush. And maybe I'll zoom in a little bit more. Let's see if I can get this decent looking. I need black. So I'll draw a little black here, and I will right click and draw that. Shirt turned out pretty good. Arm looks good to me. So I will zoom back out. And now I'll choose this again and oops, Control C, Control V. Come to this one, change to an eraser, choose my arm, change to eraser, erase that arm. I'm going to turn onion skin off, make sure I have it well erased, which I didn't. Then choose my rotate tool, rotate a little bit more. Whoops, wrong direction. And choose my pencil tool. Oops, make this white again. Turn the onion skin on and put that there. Zoom in, draw that over, go back to a regular paintbrush, draw in with black here and there, clean up with skin tone here, and zoom out. Okay, so I can turn off onion skin. You can see how that kind of looks. All right, so it's going to look better if I start up and go down and then come back up. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it and paste it at the end. Then I'll take a picture of that one, copy it, paste it at the end. Now we'll animate again. Okay, I think that's doing okay, because after that we're just coming back to this one. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. Yeah. All right, but it's too fast. So I'll come out here and I'll just change the speed and see how do I like that. Seem to be jerking back up, so I think I've got something messed up. Let's see. I've got this and this one. I think I've got these out of order, actually. That one's there. Now I've got myself kind of messed up. Let's see, how does that look? That's better. Okay, now I've got it right the order. And you can see that the shirt actually is working out pretty good. I like that speed. So there we are. Now to test this, you would need to make an object. So I would right click objects. I'm going to stop this animation because it's bugging me. I'm going to right click objects and create an object. I should call this obj_hi and use my hi sprite. Then in my room, I would choose a layer and put my, wait, is that it? Nope, that's not it. Put my sprite over here. I'm going to put it up here on the top corner. It's a pretty good size. So now when I run my room, there it is. I like that. Okay, so if you didn't want it to be that big, you could actually change the sprite. So my sprite size was 64 by 64. Look how ginormous it is now. So I could resize my sprite by coming in here and changing this to whatever I wanted it to be. Remember, maintain aspect ratio is checked, so whatever I put in the top will change proportionally, and it changes automatically, so now it's smaller in my room. You could also double click this and change the size by typing numbers in the X scale, Y scale, or you can just grab a hold of the corner and, oops, that's moving it. You can just grab a hold of the corner and stretch it out. You know, it kind of distorts when you do that. It's better to make it large and smaller than it is to make it small, start small and make it larger, but you can change things. You could also flip it and then it'll be backwards. Aye, but it would still wave. So, all right, so that's a simple way to animate a sprite. Okay, but I don't like it, so I'm going to delete it from my room because it seems kind of silly. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at cameras. Now, this room isn't too awfully large. When I run it, my player is a reasonable size, and he moves around, and we can see everything. Now, the problem is, to the human player, there is nothing in this room that is surprising, except, the fact that maybe I can walk over a cactus, but I can't walk over a stump. And that's only because I don't have a collision event for my cactus, which you definitely should. But I just haven't added it. But really, that's not what I want to have happen. What I want is to have a really big world that my human player doesn't see all of. So I want my next room to have that same color of background, and I want it to have these same 4 layers. So I'm just going to duplicate my room. So over here in my asset browser, I'm going to right click the room and choose duplicate. You can also use Control D with your room selected. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to rename this Big World. Oops. Should be using camel case. And I'm going to rename this one. Small World. Okay. Notice that they rearranged themselves. That does not mean that Big World is going to run first. They're just rearranged alphabetically. Now, what determines which room runs first is this little home icon. And you can change that. If I click on home, it brings up my room manager. And if I wanted Big World to be the one that runs first, I could just drag it up to the top, and now it has the house. And that is what I want. So I'll just close the room manager. And right now, both of my worlds are identical, but I want big world to be considerably larger. So I'm going to expand my room property, and oops, that's for small world. Here is big world. So I've expanded my room properties, and in room properties, I'm just going to change the width and the height to 3200, both of them. Now that makes my room considerably larger. And if I zoom out, you can see that, okay, so here's my room. Now my boundaries aren't really boundaries anymore. So we're going to unlock the boundaries layer. And I'm just going to select this boundary. Oops, not what I wanted to do. I'm going to select this boundary. And I'm going to have to zoom in to grab a hold of it. I want to grab a hold of it. You know you have a hold of it when you get that square icon, so or rectangle icon. So I'm going to grab a hold of it, and I'm going to set it there, and I'm going to zoom in so that I can get my arrow, and I'm going to drag it to the full width of my room. Now you can make it wider than your room, that doesn't matter, but at least the full width of your room. Then I've got this one that I just need to stretch down. Let me make these go away. Got a little more real estate to work in. Come on. Stretch that down. And I'll come up here. Choose this one. Get my arrows, stretch that over. Choose this one. Drag it over here. Again, remember, if your room is not a division of 32, because that's what my grid is set to, 32 by 32. If your room is not a division of 32, you're not going to be right up against here, but because we made it 3200, it is a division of 32 or a multiple of 32. It is divisible by 32. So I don't need to turn my grid off to place this because it snaps right on there. And stretch that way down here and stretch again until I have borders all the way around the outside. And once you have borders around the outside, I'll bring this back and I'll lock my border again. Keep that boundary layer so that you have exactly 4 boundary objects and they are all the way around the outside. And once they are around the outside, make sure you lock it so that you don't accidentally put stuff on there that doesn't really belong on there. So I've got my really big room. I've got my player here. If I run it, you'll see that my room is so big that my player is so small. I can barely see him. I can check my boundaries, running all the way over here really slowly. And it stops. And running way down here, again, really slowly. Probably should have gone in and changed the speed on that. What I want you to see is I've run off my room, it looks like. But actually what's happened is I just can't see all of it because it's so big, it doesn't even fit on my screen well. So I'm going to close that out. And I need to make sure that I can run all over this room and I can see it all. Well, I wouldn't want my human player to see all of it anyhow. That's the point. So I'm going to create a camera that will zoom in on my player, thus making him larger, and we'll follow him around as he goes around the room. Okay. In order to do that, over here in Room Properties, I'm going to expand viewports and cameras. You can collapse this because I don't need that anymore, at least not for now. I'm going to click to enable viewports. I'm going to come down here and expand viewport 0. I'm going to make this view visible. So now you can see there is my viewport size. Now notice that that is exactly the size of my original room, and that's because my viewport, my camera property, has changed to 1366 by 768, which is how big my original room was. My viewport is also 1366 by 768. We're going to talk about the difference between these two sets of numbers in a little bit. But I kind of want it to be smaller than this. So if you wanted it to be rectangular, that's fine. If you want it to be square, you could make it square. For now, I am going to make it square. I'm going to make it 768 by 768. So it's square, and it's square the height that my room used to be. And now if I run it, there's my player, and he can move around. Oh, goodness, but he can move off my room. What happened to him? Okay, that's not what I want to have happen. So the problem is my camera is not yet following anything. Object following, no object. But I do want my camera to follow, and I want him to follow my player. So in my objects, I'm going to choose my player, and now I can run it again. And as I move over here, it'll move with me. As I move down here, it'll move with me. Okay, but I really don't want my player to be on the edge of my room, kind of like pushing that camera picture, that camera edge. I want my player to stay in about the middle of my room. So what I would have to do is figure out what's half of 768. Well, let's see, half of 700 is 350, half of 68 is 34, so 384. So I'm going to set this to 384. And we're going to leave horizontal speed and vertical speed to -1. -1 just says run at the default speed. And now when I run it, you'll see that, oh, there's my player, and he's pretty much in the center of my room. Rather than starting out over on the edge like you did before, now here he's running over to the edge of my room. But this way, we can just keep walking, 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 walking. It doesn't look like he's moving. So he is, it just doesn't look like he is. So I'm going to add some stuff in my room so that I can watch for some things. And I'm going to expand my objects. I'm going to choose flowers just because I like to choose flowers. And I'm going to hold my Alt key, and I'm going to make a little flower garden. Okay, where can I draw? Ah, because I'm on my boundaries layer and it's locked. I'm going to choose my background objects layer. That flower is selected. I'm going to hold my Alt key, and I'm going to paint a little flower garden here and another little flower garden there. I'm going to put one up here in this corner, and I'll put another one down here and another one here. I'm just trying to put flowers just far enough apart that they will show up. But we also need to have some flowers in the middle. Just putting in some flower gardens.
I am not making an interesting world here, which I will expect your worlds to be interesting. I'm just trying to see if I can get all the way to all of the edges in my room. And now I'll run it. There's my player. And we're just, okay, so there's some flowers and there's some flowers. And you know what? I'm going to speed this guy up. So remember, we can do that. Open our player object, open our create event. And over here, I'm going to change my speed from 4 to, let's do this quick. So I'm going to change him to 15, which doesn't sound very fast, but it is. All right. Yep, ran into a stump. There we go. Remember that up there I had flowers in the corner. And way down here I have flowers in the corner. And way over there I have flowers in the corner. So now I can wander all around my room. And when I'm not close to the border, my player stays pretty much in the middle. But as I get close to an edge of my room, he can actually move all the way to the edge without us seeing the outside of the room. Otherwise, he stays pretty much in the center of the camera view. All right, well, we've got our camera following our player. We've got a smaller room. Just gonna go back to my room. And I want to look at what happens when we change these two sets of numbers. So I'm going to scroll this up. We have two sets of numbers. We have camera properties and we have viewport properties. So the camera properties, that determines how closely you zoom in. And the viewport properties, that determines how large the viewing area is. So if I make this larger, and run it, I'm zoomed in about the same, my character is about the same size, but my room, my view is larger. Okay, don't believe me? Let's make the viewport smaller. And run it again. And now we have this teeny little bitty room. Okay, can't see my player anymore because it's so small. Okay, so 100 by 100, way too small. 1000 by 1000, probably too big. You want to make sure that you don't create a view that is too large to be run on a small laptop. So I'm going to make this, let's stick with nice, easy numbers. I'm going to make this 700 by 700. And I'm going to change my camera to 300 by 300 and run. Still square, but I've really zoomed in on my player. So now I don't see very much room at all. And he's still really going really fast. Probably too fast and crazy, but you know, there he is. Okay, so maybe that's a little small. Now I could actually make my view a little bit larger, I think. So I'm going to make this 900 by 900. I think that will show up on my laptop. Okay, so that's a little bit bigger, but my player now might be too big. I might be zoomed in too far on my camera still, even at the 900 by 900. Now, if you wanted to make it rectangular, I'm going to make my view wider than it is tall. So I'm going to make it maybe one. Let's see. Let's make it 1500. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Now my camera is still set square, but my room is rectangular. So notice what's happened to the player. He's gotten stretched out because my camera zooms in square, but then the view is rectangular, which stretches the camera widthwise, which makes him look a little bit strange. So to keep that from happening, we need to have our camera and our room proportional. So if my height is 1/3, then my width should be 1/3. So I'm going to change this to 500. 1/3 of 1500 is 500. 1/3 of 900 is 300. And now when I run it, my player is proportional. So I can have a rectangular room, I could have a square room. Just play around with those numbers. Just make sure that the width and height remain proportional, and then your character won't get out of whack. Again, these numbers down here, now this number really should be half of the view. So this 384, if I'm going to use 1500 by 900, okay, so when I run it, my player isn't actually staying in the center of my room. He's close to the center as long as I stay away from the wall. He's close to the center vertically, but he's not in quite centered horizontally. So what I would want to do is make sure that these numbers are half of that number. So my height is 900. So that's going to be my vertical border. And the border just means how close you get to the edge before the camera moves along with you. So half of 900, that's 450. And half of 1500, that'll be my horizontal border. And half of 1500 is 750. So now if I run it, he should stay pretty much in the center of my screen. Okay, so he still doesn't seem to be centered to me, but maybe that's just the way I'm looking at him. Oh, and he's close to the center. And like I said, as you move along, if you get to the edge, it's going to get all the way to the edge without going out of our room. Not sure why we're not getting to the edge here. Might have to do with the size of our sprite. Or it might be that I've got my boundaries sitting on my room. Let's find out. I'm going to unlock this boundary layer, select it, choose this boundary, move it out. Nope, it's against the room. Choose this boundary, move it down. Nope, it's against the room. This boundary, maybe it's not that. So I'm going to look at my player, sprite. I'm going to look at his collision mask and see if it's hanging down too far. It's not. Look at my box and look at its collision mask and see if it's too big. And it's not. Okay. I'm not sure what's causing that. I'm not going to worry too much about it. If I wanted to make sure he could go all the way off the room, I could play around with the collision mask. I think it has to do with the fact that he's zoomed in so far. So it's probably like a pixel or something, but it looks a lot bigger when we run it. But you get the idea. So you can play around with your camera property and your viewport properties, and zoom in a little farther, zoom out a little farther, make it bigger, make it smaller. If these two numbers are identical, then our player is a little bit smaller, and I think that we wouldn't notice that he's not going all the way to the edge so far. I'm still not really going to the edge. Okay, maybe somebody can figure that out for me. I'm not worrying about it right now, but I would prefer my player to be a little larger, so I would probably stick with this. I like those numbers. You can use whatever numbers you would like as long as you can see your room. So then what we're going to do is you're going to arrange objects in your room in an interesting fashion. You should have some water areas. You should have some shaded areas with a bunch of palm trees. You should have some rocks here and there. You can have a single palm tree here or there. You might have a couple of water areas, whatever. Just go ahead and design your desert. Now remember, this is a desert. So when we have grass, it probably grows in patches, and it probably grows fairly close to water. And where we don't have water for long distances, we probably don't have a lot of green. So maybe cactus and rocks. You might have some dead bushes. If you have a dead bush, you might have a live bush and a dead bush. Whatever, just create a world, big world. We're going to hide a few power-ups. We're going to look at health, and then we will be done. See you in class.
Next up, power-ups and health points.